The Galactic Council Hall was silent. Hundreds of lights floated above the chamber, glowing in soft blue and silver. Tall alien nobles stood in long rows, their eyes fixed on one figure in the center of the floor. Princess Elara stood alone. She did not bow her head. She did not cry. But inside, her heart felt heavy. A tall scientist stepped forward. His voice echoed across the chamber. "The final genetic scan is complete. Her Highness cannot produce an heir." The words felt colder than space. Murmurs spread across the hall. Some nobles looked away. Others whispered behind long sleeves. In their empire, royal blood meant survival. A ruler without a child was seen as weak. A princess without the ability to continue the bloodline was seen as useless. Elara kept her back straight. She had already heard the results days ago in a private room. She had already felt the pain. But hearing it in front of the entire empire was different. This was not science anymore. This was judgment. One of the elder nobles stepped forward. His voice was sharp. "A royal who cannot give life cannot lead life." More whispers followed. The queen, Elara's mother, remained silent on her throne. Her face showed no emotion, but her fingers tightened around the armrest. Elara felt the weight of every eye in the room. For generations, her family had ruled the Andarian Empire. They had expanded across star systems. They had defeated enemies. They had kept peace between species. And now, everything seemed to depend on something she could not control. A younger noble suddenly spoke with a cold smile. "There may be another solution." The chamber grew quiet again. "We could send her away." The queen's eyes lifted slowly. "Send her where?" she asked. The noble turned toward the giant holographic map of the galaxy. His finger pointed toward a small blue world near the edge of known space. "Earth." A few nobles laughed softly. "The humans?" someone whispered. "They are emotional, primitive, weak compared to us," another voice added. The noble continued. "We call it a diplomatic gesture, cultural exchange, a symbol of friendship." The laughter grew louder, but everyone understood what it truly meant. Exile. Sending the princess to Earth would remove her from succession. It would quietly solve the problem. And if anything strange happened, the Empire could deny responsibility. Elara listened without speaking. Humans. And she had studied them in private. Their wars, their art, their strange way of bonding with one another. They were unpredictable. Not advanced like the Andarians, but not simple either. There were rumors in secret military reports, rare genetic patterns in humans that did not match other species. But those reports were ignored. The Council believed humans were biologically incompatible with advanced alien races. The general of the Imperial fleet stepped forward slowly. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "human biology reacts differently under foreign environments. Their adaptability is unusual." The noble who suggested exile waved a dismissive hand. "They are still inferior." The queen finally spoke. "If my daughter goes to Earth, she goes as royalty, not as punishment." The noble bowed slightly. "Of course, Your Majesty." But everyone in the chamber knew the truth. This was no honor. It was a quiet removal. Elara looked around the hall one last time, the place where she had trained as a child, where she had studied diplomacy, where she had dreamed of ruling with wisdom and strength. Now it felt distant. "Very well," she said calmly. "I will go." The hall fell silent again. The decision was final. 3 days later, a silver Andarian ship left orbit. Inside, Princess Elara stood near the viewing window. Earth appeared small at first, blue oceans, white clouds, green land. It looked peaceful from space. She did not know what awaited her. She only knew one thing. On Earth, there would be no throne, no council, no judgment, just humans. Far below, on a quiet part of Earth, a human man worked alone inside a research facility. And his name was Daniel Hayes. He was not a king, not a soldier, not famous. He was a genetic researcher who believed in helping people, not politics. He had no idea that the Andarian Empire had just chosen him. In a secure alien warship orbiting far above Earth, hidden observers monitored everything. One officer spoke quietly. If human DNA interacts with Andarian genetics, the result may not follow our predictions. The general replied softly, "That is why this experiment is dangerous." On the council world, nobles celebrated their clever solution. They believed the princess would live quietly among humans, forgotten, harmless. They believed the story was over. But far away, under the light of Earth's sun, a new story was about to begin, and no one in the Andarian Empire was ready for what would follow. And Daniel Hayes did not believe in destiny. He believed in data, research, and careful observation. Every morning he arrived at the same research facility before sunrise, carrying a plain metal lunchbox and a notebook filled with handwritten notes. His work focused on human genetic resilience, how certain DNA patterns allowed some people to survive extreme conditions better than others. It was not glamorous research. It did not bring fame. But Daniel believed it mattered. He believed that understanding the human body could save lives one day. On the morning the alien ship entered Earth's orbit, Daniel was in the laboratory adjusting a microscope lens. He did not look up when the emergency notification lights flickered red across the city skyline. At first, he thought it was another military drill, and governments had been preparing for contact with extraterrestrial life for years. But when every device in the lab suddenly froze and the windows darkened as if the sun itself had dimmed, he realized this was not a drill. Above Earth, the Andarian vessel descended with silent precision. It did not crash through the sky in flames. It did not fire weapons. It simply appeared large and smooth like silver glass. World leaders panicked. Satellites shut down. Military systems locked themselves without explanation. A message was transmitted in every language at once. "We come in peace. We request a biological liaison." Daniel did not know what that meant until 2 hours later, when armed security escorted him out of his lab. Government officials spoke in rushed whispers around him. A senior scientist looked pale. They requested you by name," the scientist said. Daniel frowned. "That makes no sense." "It doesn't have to," the official replied. "They know your genetic research. They've studied us." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Studied us how?" No one answered. He was taken to a secured landing zone outside the city. The Andarian ship hovered silently above a field of flattened grass. Its surface reflected sunlight in sharp angles, almost too bright to look at. When a section of the ship opened, a soft white ramp extended downward. The air around it shimmered slightly, as if reality bent to make space for it. And then she appeared. Princess Elara stepped onto Earth for the first time. She wore simple silver robes instead of royal armor. Her long, dark hair moved gently in the wind. Her eyes, slightly brighter than human eyes, scanned the horizon with controlled calm. She did not look afraid. She did not look proud. She looked tired. Daniel had imagined aliens as monstrous or mechanical. She looked neither. She looked almost human, but not entirely. There was something refined about her movements, something graceful and measured. The officials around Daniel stepped back instinctively. Ayalara's gaze settled on him. "You are Daniel Hayes," she said in clear, careful English. Her voice was soft but steady. "Yes," he answered, trying to remain calm. "I am." "You were selected due to your genetic profile and research compatibility." Daniel blinked. "Selected for what?" There was a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. "For cohabitation." The word felt strange in the open air. The human officials shifted nervously. so cameras watched from a distance, broadcasting every second worldwide. Millions of people were witnessing this moment, but none understood what it truly meant. Daniel glanced at the alien ship above. "Is this some kind of political exchange?" "Yes," Elara answered. "It is presented that way." Presented. The word did not escape Daniel's attention. He studied her more carefully. There was something behind her composure, a quiet sadness, a weight she carried alone. "You didn't choose this," he said before he could stop himself. Her eyes flickered slightly. That was the first crack in her calm expression. "No," she replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Around them, governments negotiated. Military advisors whispered into earpieces, and news anchors speculated wildly. But inside that silence, something simpler existed. Two individuals caught inside decisions made far above them. Daniel finally said, "If this is going to happen, we should at least speak privately." The officials hesitated, but the Andarian general who had stepped off the ship nodded slowly. "Observation will continue," he warned. Daniel did not argue. He knew he had no power in this situation. A secure residence was prepared for them outside the city. It was isolated but comfortable. Guards monitored the perimeter from a distance. Alien surveillance ships hovered invisibly in the upper atmosphere. Inside the residence, the air felt different, quieter. Elara stood near a window, watching trees move in the wind. She had never seen trees like this before. On her world, vegetation was engineered, controlled. Earth felt alive in a wild way. "You believe I am broken," she said suddenly. Daniel frowned. "I don't even know you." "My empire believes it," she clarified. "They believe I cannot produce life." The directness surprised him. There was no drama in her tone, only fact. Daniel leaned against the wall. "Humans don't measure worth that way." She turned to look at him. "Your history suggests otherwise." He almost smiled. "Fair point. But most of us try to do better." She studied him as if examining a specimen. "You are not angry." "About what?" "Being used." Daniel thought carefully. "I don't like it, but I don't blame you." That answer seemed to confuse her more than hostility would have. Outside, hidden in orbit, Andarian scientists activated long-range biological scanners. They monitored her body temperature, hormonal levels, and cellular responses to Earth's gravity and atmosphere. Data flowed across holographic displays. One scientist leaned forward. "Her vitals are stabilizing beyond baseline." The general narrowed his eyes. "Continue monitoring." Inside the residence, Elara sat across from Daniel at a small wooden table. The silence between them was not tense anymore. It was uncertain, but softer. "You do not treat me like royalty," she observed. "You don't act like royalty," he replied calmly. Another flicker in her expression. This time, it was almost curiosity. For the first time since the council chamber, Princess Elara did not feel judged. And far above Earth, the empire that had sent her away watched closely, unaware that something subtle had already begun to change. The experiment had started, but it was not unfolding the way they expected. The first days on Earth felt strange for Princess Elara. She had studied the planet from screens and reports, but standing on its soil was different. The air felt heavier, warmer. The wind carried smells she could not name. The sounds of distant traffic, birds, and human voices mixed together in a way that felt chaotic, but alive. On her world, everything was controlled and quiet. Here, nothing seemed perfectly ordered, yet nothing felt artificial. Daniel tried not to overwhelm her. He understood that even simple things could feel unfamiliar. He showed her how to open windows, how to adjust the temperature in the house, how to prepare basic food. She watched carefully, learning quickly. Her intelligence was sharp, trained by years of royal education. but intelligence did not prepare her for emotion. The first time she saw a sunrise from Earth's surface, she stood still for several minutes. The sky shifted from dark blue to soft orange, then to bright gold. The light touched the trees gently, not like the engineered light panels of her home planet. It felt natural, unpredictable. "You do this every day?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Most of us ignore it." She did not understand that answer. How could something so beautiful be ignored? On her world, beauty was rare and often displayed only in palaces. On Earth, it seemed to belong to everyone. Their conversations remained careful at first. Ayalara asked questions about human customs, families, and traditions. Daniel answered honestly. He told her about parents who worried too much, siblings who argued but still protected each other, and friends who chose loyalty even when it was inconvenient. She listened closely, storing every detail. "Your species bonds deeply," she observed one evening. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Sometimes too deeply." "Is that weakness?" "Sometimes, but it's also strength." She thought about that for a long time. In orbit above Earth, Andarian observers watched continuously. Advanced scanners tracked Ayalara's biological responses. Her stress levels were decreasing. Her immune system was adapting quickly to Earth's environment. Her body chemistry showed subtle changes that scientists could not immediately explain. "This is unusual," one researcher reported to the general. "Her cellular activity is improving." "Explain," the general demanded. "It is as if her body is stabilizing under human environmental conditions." The general's expression darkened. "Continue analysis. Do not interfere." Back on Earth, Daniel noticed small changes in her behavior. She began asking about human humor. She watched old movies to understand how humans expressed joy. She tried smiling more often, though it felt unfamiliar at first. Her posture became less rigid. The heavy sadness that followed her from the council chamber began to soften. One evening, a storm passed through the area. Thunder echoed across the sky. Rain fell hard against the windows. Alara stood near the glass, watching lightning flash. "Does it frighten you?" Daniel asked. "No," she answered. "It is uncontrolled. I find that interesting." "You grew up with control," Daniel said. Yes. "And now?" She paused before answering. "Now I am uncertain." Daniel did not respond with advice. He simply stood beside her. The storm passed as quickly as it came. The air afterward felt clean and cool. Days turned into weeks. They developed routines. Breakfast at the same time each morning. Short walks outside in the late afternoon. Long conversations at night. There was no romance yet, only understanding. Two beings from different worlds learning how to exist in the same space. Aylara began to notice something else. When she was near Daniel, her thoughts felt clearer. Her body felt stronger. The constant fatigue she had lived with for years seemed to fade. She slept deeply for the first time in a long time. "You appear healthier," Daniel mentioned one morning. She hesitated before answering. I feel balanced." Above them, the Andarian scientists noticed the same thing. "Her reproductive system shows unexpected activation patterns," one analyst whispered. "That is impossible," another responded. "The council confirmed genetic infertility." "Data does not lie," the first insisted. The general leaned forward, studying the holographic display. "Run full diagnostic. Quietly." Back inside the residence, Aylara asked Daniel something she had avoided for weeks. "Why are you kind to me?" The question surprised him. "Why wouldn't I be? You owe me nothing. I arrived without choice. My presence brings attention and risk." Daniel considered her words. "You didn't choose this any more than I did. Being angry at you would be pointless." She watched him carefully. "On my world, but weakness invites cruelty." "That's not unique to your world," he replied softly. "But it doesn't mean we have to repeat it." For the first time, she allowed herself a small laugh. It was quiet, uncertain, but real. In orbit, tension grew among the observers. Reports became more urgent. Hormonal shifts were recorded. Genetic signals began to align in ways that Andarian science could not explain. "This should not be possible," the lead scientist muttered. The general's voice remained calm but heavy. "Prepare a private transmission to the council." On Earth, Elara stood outside one evening, feeling the wind move through her hair. She closed her eyes and placed a hand lightly over her abdomen, not fully understanding why. Something inside her felt different. Not painful, not alarming, just unfamiliar. Daniel noticed the gesture. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she answered slowly. "I believe something is changing." He did not yet understand the weight of those words. Far across the galaxy, in the Grand Andarian Council chamber, a silent alert reached the Queen's throne. Biological anomaly detected. The nobles who had laughed at her exile leaned forward. The experiment they thought would quietly erase her from power was beginning to show signs of something far more dangerous, something alive. And for the first time since her departure, Princess Elara felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. The signal reached the Andarian Council in the middle of a formal session. It was not loud, but it froze the chamber more effectively than any alarm. A red light flickered across the floating display panels above the nobles' heads. The data streams moved rapidly, symbols shifting too fast for most of them to understand. Only the royal scientists recognized what they were seeing, and even they struggled to accept it. The lead genetic analyst stepped forward slowly. His voice, usually steady, carried the slightest tremor. "Her Highness is showing reproductive activation." The chamber erupted in whispers. Some nobles stood, others demanded clarification. "That is impossible," one elder snapped. "Her genome was declared non-viable." "Yes," the scientist answered, adjusting the holographic display, "under Andarian environmental conditions." A silence followed those words. The general of the Imperial fleet folded his hands behind his back. "You are suggesting the human environment is altering her biology." "Not just the environment," the scientist replied carefully. "There are signs of genetic resonance. Human DNA may be interacting in ways we have never documented." The Queen remained perfectly still upon her throne. Her expression revealed nothing, but her eyes did not leave the data. "Confirm," she commanded. "We are running secondary scans now," the scientist said. Far below, on Earth, Elara felt the change before anyone explained it to her. It was subtle at first. A slight warmth in her body, a steady rhythm beneath her palm when she placed her hand over her abdomen. Her senses felt sharper, her balance stronger. She moved with more energy than she had known in years. Daniel noticed her increased vitality. She walked longer distances without fatigue. She asked more questions. Her posture no longer carried the quiet weight of exile. Something inside her had shifted. "You seem different," he said one afternoon as they stood near a quiet lake outside the city. "I feel different," she admitted. "Stronger." Daniel studied her carefully. "Is that good?" "I believe so." That evening, a secure transmission arrived from orbit. The Andarian general requested a private medical scan. The tone was calm, but urgency hid beneath it. Elara understood what that meant. She looked at Daniel before responding. "They are watching." "I assume they always were," he answered. She did not argue. A portable Andarian scanning device was lowered discreetly into the residence. It hovered in the air, projecting soft blue light across her body. The machine hummed quietly as it analyzed cellular structures and hormonal levels. The data transmitted instantly back to orbit. In the council chamber, the holographic image stabilized. The result appeared clearly. Positive gestational markers detected. The scientist inhaled sharply. "It is confirmed!" Shock moved through the chamber like a physical force. Some nobles denied the result immediately. Others demanded proof of tampering. Accusations began forming before logic could catch up. "Human interference," one counselor insisted. "Illegal genetic modification." The scientist shook his head. "There is no evidence of external manipulation. The fusion is natural." "Natural?" another shouted. "With humans?" The queen finally stood. The room fell silent at once. "Explain," she said, her voice firm but controlled. The scientist swallowed. "Human DNA contains adaptive coding sequences that are dormant under their own species' limitations. When introduced to Andarian biology, those sequences appear to activate compatibility pathways we did not believe possible." The general narrowed his eyes. "You are saying the humans were never incompatible?" "We were wrong," the scientist admitted quietly. On Earth, the scanner completed its analysis. A soft tone signaled the end of the process. Elara felt her heart race slightly as the device projected the final result in simple translation. Pregnancy confirmed. She stared at the words without speaking. Daniel looked at her carefully. "Is it accurate?" "Yes," she whispered. The room felt suddenly smaller. The world outside continued as usual. Cars passing, wind moving through trees, distant city noise, but inside the residence, time seemed to slow. "They said I could not carry life," she said softly, almost to herself. Daniel did not step forward immediately. He understood the weight of the moment. "They were wrong," he replied calmly. Elara closed her eyes briefly. For years she had carried the label of failure. For years she had believed her body had betrayed her empire. Now the impossible stood quietly within her. Above Earth, tension escalated rapidly. "This changes succession law," one noble argued. "It changes political power," another added. "If the child is viable, it represents a new bloodline." "Half human," someone muttered with disdain. The queen silenced them with a single raised hand. "Half Andarian," she corrected. The general stepped forward. "If this child survives, it could unite two species, or threaten our dominance." The word dominance hung heavy in the air. Back on Earth, and Daniel sat beside Elara at the small wooden table where they had shared so many cautious conversations. There was no celebration yet. Only quiet realization. "Do you regret coming here?" he asked gently. She opened her eyes and looked at him steadily. "No." It was the first time she had spoken that word with certainty since leaving her world. He nodded slowly. "Then whatever comes next, we face it." She studied him carefully. "You understand this will not remain private." "I assumed it never would." A faint smile touched her lips. In orbit, the general issued new orders. Surveillance increased. Contingency plans were drafted. Some counselors suggested retrieval by force. Others feared that action would confirm human strength rather than weaken it. The galaxy had believed the exile would end a problem quietly. Instead, it had created something entirely new. A life that should not exist. A bond that should not be possible. And a future no one had predicted. As night fell over Earth, Elara stood once more by the window, watching the stars. Somewhere beyond them, her empire debated her existence. But for the first time, she did not feel like a discarded royal. She felt like the beginning of something. And far above, the Andarian Council realized with growing unease that the humans they had mocked were not simple, not primitive, and not biologically limited. They were adaptable, and adaptation was the most dangerous power in the galaxy. The confirmation of Ayalara's pregnancy did not remain secret for long. In the Andarian Empire, information moved quickly when it threatened tradition. Within hours, the inner circle of nobles knew. Within days, the outer systems began whispering. The word impossible spread across star networks like a spark in dry air. The princess who had been declared infertile was carrying a child, and not just any child, but one conceived on Earth. In the council chamber, debate turned into argument. Some nobles demanded immediate retrieval of the princess. Others insisted the pregnancy be terminated to preserve genetic purity. A smaller, quieter group simply stared at the data in disbelief. The science did not match centuries of biological certainty. Every model, every prediction, every controlled experiment had said that Andarian reproductive systems could not harmonize with human DNA. Yet the scans were clear. The embryo was stable. The cellular fusion was clean. There were no signs of genetic collapse. The general of the Imperial fleet stood near the holographic display, his expression unreadable. "We underestimated human adaptability," he said calmly. One counselor scoffed. "Adaptability is not superiority." "No," the general replied evenly, "but it is survival." The queen listened without interrupting. Her gaze remained fixed on the rotating image of the developing embryo. It was small, only a cluster of growing cells. But to her, it represented more than biology. It represented defiance of expectation. On Earth, Elara felt both calm and uncertain. Her body responded naturally, instinctively. She experienced waves of energy followed by deep rest. Daniel remained near her, not as a ruler or protector, but as a steady presence. He researched quietly, reviewing human and alien biological data. He understood the risk, but he also saw something extraordinary in the patterns forming within the scans. "It's balanced," he said one evening, projecting a simplified version of the genetic data onto a screen in the residence. "Your DNA isn't overpowering mine. Mine isn't overpowering yours. It's integrating." Elara studied the display carefully. "Integration is rare in our species." "It's common in ours," Daniel replied softly. "Humans evolved by mixing, adapting, surviving different climates and challenges." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You believe that is why this is possible?" "Yes." Above them, Andarian observers recorded every biological fluctuation. The embryo showed unusual resilience. Its cells adapted to both Andarian and human genetic instructions without conflict. In some areas, the hybrid coding appeared stronger than either parent species alone. Immune responses were heightened. Neural growth indicators were advanced. "This child could represent evolutionary acceleration," one scientist whispered in orbit. "That is precisely the problem," another answered. Back in the council chamber, fear began to mix with pride. If the child survived, it would hold a claim to two worlds. It could unify systems or destabilize them entirely. "We must bring her back," one noble insisted. "Under protection." "Or control," another muttered. The queen finally spoke. "She will not be taken by force." Several heads turned sharply. "Your Majesty," one elder protested, "this child could alter the balance of power across the galaxy." The queen's voice remained steady. "Then perhaps the balance was flawed." Silence followed, and it was not agreement, but it was enough to pause escalation. On Earth, life continued in quiet contrast to the tension in orbit. Daniel and Elara walked through parks where children played freely. She watched human parents guide small hands, lift tiny bodies, laugh without fear. The simplicity of it moved her deeply. "You do not treat children as political assets," she observed. "Most of us don't," Daniel said. "They're just kids." The idea fascinated her. On Andaria, royal children were symbols first, individuals second. One afternoon, a group of journalists attempted to approach the residence. Governments could not hide the truth forever. The public had begun to suspect that something historic was unfolding. Daniel shielded Ilara from cameras as security redirected the crowd. She did not appear frightened, only reflective. "They fear what they do not understand," she said. "Everyone does," Daniel replied. Weeks passed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Medical scans showed stable development and accelerated neural formation. The hybrid child appeared physically viable, stronger than predicted. Its heart rhythm was steady and powerful. In orbit, the general received a private message from the Queen. "Continue observation," she ordered. "No interference." "Even if the Council pressures action?" he asked. "Especially then." The general understood. The Queen was no longer seeing the child as a threat. She was seeing possibility. Back on Earth, Ilara sat alone one evening while Daniel prepared food in the kitchen. She placed her hand gently against her abdomen. She could feel subtle movements now, faint but undeniable. It was not simply biology. It was connection. For years she had been defined by absence, by what she could not give. Now she carried presence. Daniel returned and noticed her expression. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she answered softly. "It is alive." He smiled slightly. "That's usually how it works." She studied him carefully. "You are not afraid." He thought for a moment. "I am, but not of the child." "Of what, then?" "Of what others might try to do." In orbit, contingency plans grew more detailed. Some counselors drafted proposals for protective extraction. Others quietly explored military scenarios. The Empire did not fear weakness anymore. It feared change. The general watched Earth rotate slowly beneath the ship. "If we act aggressively," he warned the Council, "we will confirm human strength. And if we do nothing," a noble demanded, then we witness history." On Earth, Daniel and Ilara stood together outside under the stars. The sky was clear, filled with distant light. Somewhere among those stars, her empire argued over her existence. "They sent me here as a joke," she said quietly. "And?" Daniel asked. She looked at him with steady eyes. "I believe they are no longer laughing." In the council chamber, final reports were delivered. The hybrid child was viable, healthy, genetically stable. The impossible had become undeniable. The Andarian Empire had tried to erase a weakness. Instead, it had created a future. And across the galaxy, leaders began to understand that humanity had never been primitive. It had simply been patient. The news could no longer be contained. What began as quiet scientific reports within the Andarian Council became a controlled public announcement across the Empire. The princess was expecting a child. The heir carried human and Andarian blood. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some citizens saw it as a miracle. Others saw it as contamination. Many saw it as uncertainty, and uncertainty frightened powerful systems more than open enemies ever had. In the grand capital of Andaria, holographic screens filled city skies with debate. Scholars argued about genetic theory. Military analysts discussed future alliances. Religious leaders questioned destiny. The word human no longer sounded small when spoken in the council halls. It carried weight now. It carried possibility. Within the council chamber, tension reached a dangerous level. A faction of nobles led by Lord Valor demanded immediate retrieval of the princess and the child. They argued that allowing the hybrid to be born on Earth would weaken Andarian authority. They claimed that the humans would use the child as leverage. They insisted that the Empire must act before influence shifted permanently. "The longer we wait," Valor declared, "the stronger their position becomes. This child will symbolize human equality. That alone is unacceptable." The general of the Imperial fleet responded calmly. "It will symbolize evolution, not equality." Vailor's eyes narrowed. You speak as if that is a positive outcome. I speak as a strategist, the general replied. Destroying the child would unite humanity against us. Forcing retrieval would confirm their strength. Underestimating them once was a mistake. I will not repeat it. The queen listened without interruption, her gaze steady. She had ruled through wars and alliances, through expansion and crisis. But this was different. This was not an external threat. It was internal transformation. On Earth, the pressure was beginning to show. Satellite images revealed faint Andarian ships adjusting positions in orbit. Military officials worldwide grew nervous. Governments demanded reassurance. The human public was divided between awe and fear. Some celebrated the idea of interspecies unity, others worried about invasion. Inside the protected residence, Daniel monitored the news while Elara rested. The pregnancy was progressing faster than human norms, but within Andarian standards. The hybrid child appeared to inherit accelerated neural growth from both species. Doctors, both human and Andarian, confirmed that development was stable. Yet the political atmosphere darkened. Daniel turned off the screen and sat beside Elara. They're arguing, he said quietly. They always do, she replied. It feels different now. She opened her eyes slowly. Because now, they fear loss of control. Daniel studied her. Do you regret not returning when they first asked? No, she answered immediately. If I return under fear, the child becomes a weapon. If I remain by choice, the child becomes a bridge. Her clarity surprised him. She had changed. The princess who arrived carrying shame now carried purpose. In orbit, Lord Vailor moved quietly. He contacted sympathetic commanders within the fleet. His plan was simple. Stage a protective extraction without council approval. If the princess and child were secured, the narrative could be controlled afterward. The general received intelligence of this plan through loyal officers. His expression hardened. He transmitted a private message to the queen. Vailor intends unauthorized action, he reported. The queen's response was swift. Intercept. Above Earth, 2 Andarian cruisers shifted formation subtly. Energy signatures flared briefly as command codes were overridden. Vailor's ship found its systems locked before it could descend. In the council chamber, guards entered quietly and placed Lord Vailor under arrest. Shock rippled through the nobles. The queen stood once more. No one, she declared, will endanger my daughter or her child for pride. Her voice carried authority that silenced opposition. Back on Earth, the sky remained calm. Elara stood outside at dusk, feeling the child move more strongly now. Each movement felt like confirmation, not just of life, but of belonging. Daniel approached slowly. Something happened up there, he said, glancing at the faint lights of distant ships. Yes, she replied. The queen has chosen. He looked at her carefully. Chosen what? To protect us. The relief in her voice was quiet, but real. Days later, the Andarian Council broadcast an official statement across the galaxy. The hybrid child would be recognized as legitimate. The Empire would pursue diplomatic partnership with humanity rather than dominance. The language was careful, but the message was clear. Humans were no longer dismissed. On Earth, reactions ranged from celebration to cautious optimism. Scientists were eager to study interspecies compatibility. Political leaders saw potential for alliances beyond anything imagined before. Ordinary people watched history unfold through screens, uncertain but fascinated. Inside the residence, Elara felt the final weeks approach. The pregnancy accelerated slightly as predicted by Andarian physiology. The child's heartbeat was strong. Medical teams prepared quietly, blending human and alien technology. One evening, Daniel sat beside her as she rested. They were afraid of us, he said thoughtfully. They were afraid of change, she corrected gently. He nodded. And now? Now they understand we are not enemies. Daniel smiled faintly. That sounds familiar. She looked at him with warmth that had not existed when she first arrived. Yes, it does. Above them, the general watched Earth rotate beneath the fleet. And he understood something now that the Council had not understood months earlier. Humanity's greatest strength was not physical power. It was adaptability, patience, the ability to integrate difference rather than destroy it. The Empire had once laughed at humans. Now it studied them. And as the time of birth approached, the galaxy waited, not with mockery, but with anticipation. The child that should not exist was about to arrive, and nothing would remain the same afterward. The day the child was born, the galaxy held its breath. It did not happen in a palace or under alien crystal lights. It happened in a quiet medical facility on Earth, where human doctors and Andarian specialists worked side by side. The room was calm, controlled, and filled with advanced equipment from two civilizations that had once considered each other incompatible. Elara did not scream. Andarians were trained from childhood to endure pain with discipline. But this pain was different. It was not political. It was not humiliation. It was creation. Daniel remained beside her, steady and silent, offering support without words. He had never imagined himself in such a moment. Yet he did not hesitate. When the child finally entered the world, the sound that followed was small but powerful. A cry, clear, strong, alive. The room froze for a fraction of a second, then relief filled the air. The hybrid child's skin carried a faint silver tone beneath human warmth. Its eyes opened almost immediately, bright and aware in a way that stunned both human and Andarian doctors. A neural reading showed extraordinary activity. Heart rhythm was steady. Cellular scans displayed perfect genetic balance. No instability, no collapse, no failure. The impossible child was not fragile. It was strong. In orbit above Earth, the general received confirmation. He did not smile, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. He transmitted the data directly to the Andarian Council. In the grand chamber, nobles stood in silence as the holographic image of the newborn appeared above the floor. No one laughed. No one whispered. The child moved its tiny hands calmly, eyes open as if studying the world it had just entered. The queen rose slowly from her throne. "It lives," she said. "Yes, Your Majesty," the scientist confirmed. "And it is stable." "Yes." The chamber remained quiet. For generations, Miss Andarians had defined strength through dominance and lineage purity. Now they faced a new truth. Strength could also come from integration. On Earth, Elara held her child carefully. She studied its face with wonder. For the first time in her life, she felt complete, not because she fulfilled expectation, but because she had survived judgment. Daniel sat beside her, watching both mother and child with quiet pride. He did not see politics. He did not see evolution. He saw a small life that depended on them both. Days later, the Andarian Council made an unprecedented decision. The princess and her child would be invited, formally and publicly, to return to the capital. Not as exile, not as experiment, but as heirs. The invitation was not forced. It was requested. Elara considered it carefully. And returning meant stepping back into the world that had rejected her. It meant facing nobles who once called her broken. But it also meant shaping the future of two civilizations. Daniel did not pressure her. "Whatever you choose," he said simply, "we choose together." She nodded. The return was unlike her departure. When the Andarian ship descended toward the capital world, it was not silent. It was welcomed. Thousands gathered beneath the shining towers of the city. Holographic banners displayed the image of the child. The atmosphere was cautious but hopeful. As the ramp lowered, Elara stepped forward, no longer carrying shame. She held her child confidently in her arms. Daniel walked beside her, not as subject, not as prisoner, but as equal partner. The council chamber, once filled with whispers of weakness, stood silent again. But this silence was different. The nobles who had laughed now bowed their heads. The queen stepped down from her throne, something no ruler had done in centuries. She approached her daughter slowly and looked at the child closely. The newborn's bright eyes met hers without fear. "This is the future," the queen said quietly. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably. The old ways did not disappear overnight, but change had begun, and it could not be undone. The general addressed the chamber. Human adaptability and Andarian refinement have created something new. Not lesser, not diluted, stronger. Across the galaxy, the message spread. Humans were no longer seen as primitive. They were studied as partners. Diplomatic channels opened. Scientific exchanges expanded. Military tensions eased. And the existence of one child had shifted perception more effectively than fleets ever could. Later, on a quiet balcony overlooking the capital city, Elara stood beside Daniel. The towers shimmered in the distance. Alien citizens moved through the streets below, some still staring at the human beside their princess. "They sent me to you as a joke," she said softly. Daniel looked at the stars above. "And?" She smiled faintly. "The galaxy does not laugh now." He nodded. The child stirred gently in her arms. Its small fingers wrapped around Daniel's thumb with surprising strength. In that moment, the truth became clear. The Empire had tried to remove a weakness. Instead, it had discovered growth. It had tried to mock humanity. Instead, it had found resilience. The Andarians had once believed power meant control, and now they understood something deeper. Power could also mean adaptation. Power could mean unity. Power could mean letting go of fear. As the twin suns of the Andarian homeworld set beyond the horizon, casting golden light across the city, the princess who had once stood alone in judgment now stood at the center of transformation. They had called her infertile. They had sent her away. She returned not only with a child, she returned with a future, and the galaxy would never be the same again.